Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I feel bad for Dr. Hogue because I want you to know your testimony was not ignored, so I have a question for you, sir. And I saved it up for my last effort. You talked specifically about non-governmental organizations that regulate certain conduct and activities, such as the International Antarctic Trade Organization and FINRA. And my question for you is, do we know how successful, can you describe whether those have been successful achieving their organizational ends?
I don't have a good answer for you on that, but I'd be happy to go back and provide that after the hearing.
Well, thank you. You've set me up to move right over to the rest of the panel, which is there any organized cooperative or collaborative effort to address some of the issues we've been talking about today internationally that you're aware of? And if so, can you please describe those briefly? And I guess we'll just start with several of you nodding your heads. Ms. Montgomery first, please.
Yes, the UN addresses a lot of the debris issues and has issued guidelines on them. There is also an industry association, the Space Data Association, that coordinates amongst themselves so as to make sure they don't bump into each other and cause debris.
Dr. Dourado, in our previous exchange, you mentioned essentially, I'll say, transparency from government organizations as to where their space debris or space activities are. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Certainly. The Department of Defense currently has much higher resolution data on space situational awareness than does the Space Data Association that Ms. Montgomery referenced. And I think it would be useful for the U.S. government to share some of that data with the private sector in order to improve their capabilities.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the witnesses be allowed to answer the questions. Thank you. Mr. Loverro.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As Ms. Montgomery said, there are several activities under sponsorship of the UN. One of them that my office was heavily involved in is called COPURUS, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, that we're trying to go ahead and look at what kind of rules would we need to use internationally to guide our use of space. I found it, quite frankly, very unfortunate that the U.S. had not established its own rules first that we could then take to COPURUS and convince others to use. We had done this in the debris guidelines that were mentioned earlier. NASA developed a set of standards, guidelines on orbital debris that we then took as a nation to COPURUS and convinced the rest of the world they should follow. That's good for the U.S. We should do it again here. We should have a position in COPURUS other than to say we have no position, because that leaves the floor open for others to go ahead and insert their position.
And Mr. Burnett. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.